We are going to tackle the violence, gender violence online, and the need of identifying solutions that can shed light. This will be the first panel of the two panels of today. We're going to cover the gender crimes online, how we can move forward to a more secure and safer digital world, and we're going to address the situation and the status quo of cyber crime in terms of gender crimes and the legal framework. Some of the measures proposed by the associative sector also will be very important, with a lot of challenges ahead. And here we have some professionals to talk about these topics. They are chaired by Elvira Tejada. She is National Coordinator of Computing Criminal Legal Department. Thank you very much to you all.
For the initiative they've taken, I think this is a great initiative to organize such a meeting for us to reflect on these two topics that are living, the gender topic on the one side and cybersecurity on the other side. Two topics that have implications for many reasons, and I think it's only good for professionals with different perspectives and points of view to sit down and reflect on this together so that we can decide the lines we have to take. And I feel grateful for them for having chosen me to coordinate a table that for me is quite interesting, because it's something I devote my daily life, the fight against criminality and gender violence online. And I was impressed to hear what the previous speaker, the keynote speaker, was saying. I think she has perfectly launched or opened the session, because it's true that all these capabilities or these potentials the technological tools are having an impact on criminality, and very seriously in everything related to gender violence. And I have to accept it is like that, because if we assume that problem, if we accept it, we will be able to find solutions. Otherwise, it's impossible. So I think this problem is twofold, and she explained it very well. On the one hand, we have the hatred speech, violence speech, discrimination against those who are different, in this case, those who have a different sex or gender, that is propagating enormously through the internet. And we have to give responses to that, because it can affect the fundamental values our cohabitation is supported by. So we have to fight it from the institutions and from everywhere. And then the second aspect, and most individual one, is the specific actions of violence that are taking place on the internet towards specific people, especially women, in case of offense, marginalization and degradation, something that we know perfectly well in the physical world and that is now being reproduced in the on the internet. And that's a real problem, and that's a problem that we have to solve. So I try to be very optimistic, because I think life has to be taken bravely and with optimism, by thinking that we can, there are things we can do. So we are doing a follow-up and a monitorization of this type of crimes that are committed on the internet. The previous speaker was talking about the problem of the hatred speech against women, the withdrawal or the removal of contents on the internet, and we are now doing the same We are also accusing and reporting those who are committing acts of violence on the internet, but our IT applications are not sufficiently developed, are not well enough developed, and we don't have enough data. But I can say that in terms of crimes against freedom and security of people, which is the general framework for this type of actions, last year we reported 95% more cases than in 2015. And we do it hand in hand with other area in the Prosecutor's Office of the Government of Spain, that is the area specialized in violence against women. We sit down sometimes together in order to find joint solutions and to work together, because this is something we have to do together. The previous speaker was talking about legislation too, that is making steps. In Spain, we've done 2 important reforms in 2015 for the criminal prosecution law and in the criminal law in general, in order to typify new crimes, and Carolina will talk about it, in order to fight against the new manifestations of criminal action that already existed, but that is finding new ways to come to exist. And I will finish by saying, or by making reference to a transnational question. In the Budapest Convention, that is the most important convention that exists at an international level in the fight against cybersecurity. It's a convention by the Council of Europe, signed by many countries in the world. While in this Budapest Convention, there is a list of mechanisms to try and fight against cyber lack of safety. And in the last September's meeting, a proposal was unanimously passed to try and work in a parallel protocol to try and create a set of tools for illegal activities, especially illegal activities against women and children with new technologies. Because the concern for this topic is now extending to the rest of the world. And I think this type of fora contribute with ideas and make this progress. So now I will introduce the speakers in this roundtable. So the first one is José Antonio Burriel. He's a lawyer, a journalist, has a PhD in philosophy, and the president and founder of the association called No Más Violencia de Género, No More Gender Violence. He has a very long CV, but I have selected just a few things. So, José Antonio, you have the floor. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful to INCIBE for the kindness they've had with me, because I'm not able to sit down in one of those armchairs. I have to be sitting here because I have a physical disability, not a psychic or a psychological disability, but only physical. So, the title of my speech is An Umbrella for Teenagers, and I will explain it. I've spent many years fighting against violence against women, and also violence against other types of people, adults and teenagers. And so a few years ago I decided, well, instead of me finding the topics, I want people to give me topics to fight against. And I got to the streets and I decided to listen to the people. And I found that the reality is better than what these studies show. And secondly, people do not recognize, do not admit gender violence exists because they see it everywhere. They see it with their parents. They see it on TV. They see it on the social networks, on the social media, on YouTube, videos everywhere, Instagram, and in any mass media. So children see it. So even if you tell them there is such thing as gender violence, they think it's normal because they see it everywhere. But if you make them reflect upon that, which is not difficult, because I think we have to go to the schools and let them know or teach them how to love themselves. Because I'm sure that most of people in the audience have fallen in love in time, in life, at least 1, 2, 3, 4 times. I've fallen in love several times until I found my one love. But nobody taught you the first time you fell in love how to love yourselves. What's more, if you fell in love, and now young people say they fall in love earlier when they are 17, 18, and nobody allow anybody else to teach us how to love ourselves. Because even with my father, when my father tried to teach me how to love myself or to love someone, I said, well, this is how you love my mother, but I'm not accepting this from you. So when you engage in a relationship, you don't know how to behave. And so when they feel something is not going right, they start crying and shouting. And at that very moment, they rebel. They rebel against the situation. And Lucia Cerón, the director of the Women Institute, will talk about this later. So I go to the Institute for Women and we talk to the teenagers and we say we're going to make a manifesto with 16,000 signatures. But I will read out something taken from the manifesto. Our aim with this petition is to avoid the dissemination of this type of songs and to propose to create an observatory that will survey the type of messages that these songs convey. So they put a list of songs. And now another expert has published a book talking about these songs. And yesterday I was listening to 6 chauvinist songs by Justin Bieber, Malou, Alejandro Sanz, and some other people with Anglo-Saxon names that I don't feel I can pronounce today. They convey negative messages. And then if you can look for a song in your smartphone, if you listen to the 40 Principales song list, you will listen to a list of songs that have negative messages, one after the other. And so they are persuaded, we are persuaded that this is the kind of love that we are looking for. We don't have enough personality or enough critical sense or enough critical thinking to decide that these are bad songs. So we need an umbrella. That's why I say that teenagers need an umbrella, because otherwise we'll get showered by this rain of songs. So one good day I received a call. Someone asked me, do you want to come and watch a feminine rugby match? And I said, well, I'm a journalist. Yes, I mean. And well, in rugby, you have one against another for the first and the second time, and then in the third time they have tea together. So I was invited to talk about chauvinism and machismo there, and then they asked me to write a manifesto, and 15 feminine teams throughout Spain have signed it, and all of them have to sign it. And I say, why don't we listen more to them? Instead of programming ourselves what they have to do, why don't we accept that they are asking for something to us, they are saying what they need, which is quite simple. The captain of a certain team, a feminine team named Lucia, said, well, have you read the comprehensive law? Well, the law talks about the mass media because they want to be self-regulated. I'm a journalist, remember? They talk about illegal advertising. Article number 10. Article number 10 reads, according to the law number 34, advertising will be illegal if they use the image of a woman with a derisory aim. So this has been published by the Prosecutor's office. And then the judges might say, well, there is such thing as freedom of expression. I would say, and what about the minors? Because all of us, and you and me, have a critical thinking. So for minors, persons with 13, 14 years of age, the prosecutor has to protect them. Yeah, freedom of speech. But who has to protect the minors? The underaged. It's not the parents. Well, I'd like the parents to get more involved in their children's education. Or some might say the teachers. What I say is that teenagers are looking for help. They need an umbrella, and they're asking for that umbrella so that they can protect themselves of this pouring rain. So if there are songs that they are listening to, please listen to them. Are those songs illegal advertising? We have to protect our children from those songs. Nobody's protecting them from those songs. If we are not protected by anybody else from those songs, well, it's up to us. So if the legislation is bad, maybe we have to change the legislation. We have to modify the laws, or we have to find a way so that we'll have to find a way to make the law work. So, for example, the Women Institute says has as the primary purpose to promote the gender equality and the participation of women in the public life. That's what they say. But then they also say that they have to act against the emitters or the provokers, the causers of those negative messages. So I invite you to take a test. I've met many friends here. I've seen a feeling with many people here in this forum. But once I stepped into a BMW car selling shop, and I was very well dressed, and I saw a car that I liked. The price was 34,000 euros, and I said, well, the woman in the advertising is included in the price. The same goes for the perfumes. There's always a woman and a proposal by the perfume. So I'm not going to reproduce it here, but it's something obscene. So I always say it's the woman and what she's proposing including. So, for example, when we talk about the 12 grapes, can you think of the name of the cook? Do you remember the TV show? He's talking about a TV show. The fat cook. His name is Chicote. He's a famous cook who has a TV show in Spain. Well, he was talking to a woman at some point, and he was talking about nasty things with her. Isn't that woman discrimination? Shouldn't we be the same? So why cannot we treat the men equally and offer the men as a way to give pleasure to the women? I'm not exaggerating. And maybe Lucia will talk about it later. So, for example, if I want to report this to a judge, the judge will ignore it. But if I publish it on social media, and then it will be published by the institute, and then we'll say that we reported that case and that the judges ignored it. So I just want to repeat what I said. I'm just asking what the teenagers are asking for. So I will add something. Education. The only vaccine is education, but good education. And that education must be performed by the professionals. It has to be put on the hands of people with very good intentions. Because if we put it on the hands of people with good intentions, but without the right training, it's of no use, even if they've done a master's degree, because otherwise it will be harmful for women. The same goes for the police forces. So we cannot let a person report a fact and then having a policeman or a policewoman who doesn't know how to handle it, who's just graduated from the police academy, because there are women who go there to report something, they are traumatized, and then the police men and women do know how to handle that case. One of my students was a shaman, and he told me that what we have to do with people, especially with women, is something very nice to say, apapachear, which is an Aztec word that is embracing with your heart, embracing them with your heart. If you don't embrace women with your heart, there's nothing we can do. And it's unfair because women have suffered a lot and we haven't. So this is something for the teenagers. If we save them, the improvement will be huge. Yes, of course, we have to train the parents, but also the rest of the society. That's all I wanted to say. I'm sorry to be half standing or half sitting here, but as I said at the beginning, I have a physical disability. Thank you. Thank you, José Antonio, for that reality you have explained to us and for putting on the table some very real topics and the way we treat women, that we treat them as things, objects, objectification of women. And now I'll give the floor to Carlos Yuste González, who is the Chief Inspector of the Police National Force and the Chief of the Logic and IT departments of the Technological Information Unit of the Police Forces. So in our work, together with the Guardia Civil Police Corps, we find many manifestations of gender violence that use the social media and the internet to spread their actions. In recent years or in the past, they used to be more localized, but now they can spread everywhere thanks to the use of the internet causing irreparable damages to the victim. And it also shows that there is another way of dominance or domination, because now someone with a smartphone can control another person. So with an array of technological solutions that can be easily acquired through the internet, they can control another person's smartphone, their spouse's smartphone, etc. So we in our daily work, we do something called cyber patrolling, which is specially devised for looking for child pornography, but we also use it for this type of manifestations. So this is a very known social media for microblogging, and we found these macho domination messages saying that women must serve the purposes of the men. And the first reaction is, of course, we have to close this. And then we find the main obstacle, because behind this social media there are companies located in other countries abroad, most of them being the United States. So even if we ask them to close these profiles, they will be ignored. We will be ignored. And if we ask a judge to close it, in Spain, they will have to ask the authorities in the home country of the blog, of the profile, to close it, because we couldn't do it. It's not a problem in Spain, it's a global problem. For example, this took place in Brazil with WhatsApp. There was an investigation there in which they asked WhatsApp to provide information. You know, WhatsApp belongs to Facebook. So there was a legal intervention with a judicial authority, and WhatsApp decided not to disclose the data. So they escalated the case, but they couldn't get the information. So the person eventually went to prison, but the information stayed in WhatsApp. WhatsApp didn't disclose it. And then this is another profile that we can find in Twitter. It's a profile called Only a Few Ones Are Dead. Well, I want to show you these images. They're too harsh, but sometimes you have to look at them, because sometimes we talk about the victims, but we cannot see their faces. For example, this person in Twitter said, well, I beat my spouse, and then we went to the hospital, and then I pushed her down the stairs, and I made fun of it. For example, well, after many negative criticism and comments, sometimes Facebook decides to close the profile, or Twitter decides to close the profile, but there's so much we can do, because the reality is that at the national level, and I think the Guardia Civil Police Corps at the National Police Corps, even if coordinated by the Special Prosecutor's Office, know that there are tools, and we use the tools that we have. But we don't have enough of them. For example, this Twitter profile said that 53 dead women is not enough. For example, they also talk about the case of Marta del Castillo, a teenager that was assassinated by her boyfriend, and they make fun of it. This is a crime, whether you accept it or not. This is a crime. And then we have this person, this guy who was threatening a group of women with a gun. We identified the physical person behind the Twitter name or the Twitter username, and then we prosecute We prosecuted him. He was sentenced to 2 years of imprisonment. Then we can argue whether it's enough or too much or very little, but at least we have the weapons we need to try and prosecute this type of people, at least if they act at the national level, where we can control the justice administration. Maybe we have to change the legislation at the European level, which is maybe the one we have to tackle now, so that we can prevent these people to get protection in other countries, or for these companies to get protection in other countries. That's what I wanted to say.
Thanks so much, Carlos. Obviously, we do as much as we can. The claims that get to the prosecuting office, the police force, we look into them as far as we can. Of course, if there is some information regarding another country and it's not easy to obtain information, then we face a problem. But as long as we can work with countries that collaborate with us, then we move on. And above all, so that people know that that has to be punished and cannot go scot-free. And then I just wanted to highlight as well what you mentioned regarding the Budapest Convention. We are making efforts to try to collect all the international legislation to try to identify tools to act at all scenarios. Then we have the next speaker, who is the colonel, the lieutenant colonel, and he is representing here the civil police. Juan Antonio Rodríguez is the chief of the Department of Telematic Crimes. Well, in the line of what Carlos mentioned, I was thinking of how new technologies are affecting aspects that have to do with violence against women. Carlos, kind of introduced the general content, but I tried to go a bit further to try to look into the practical side of it all. An example that we can share is everything that has had to do with our participation in the investigation of the Anna Claire disappearance. When a person disappears, not only in the case of Diana, we also have another case that we are participating in Monasterio in Badajoz. We find people with intense activity in social media. Most of the relationships they establish are through technologies, new technologies. For a classical researcher, in which a crime or a disappearance is just based on questioning many witnesses or people who are close to the person who has disappeared, that's okay. But now with the use of technologies, social life of people goes beyond. It is much more active, for example, in social media, and not so active in the real world. So researchers faced a serious problem, how to face that part of the research, when a person is much more present in social media than in the social, physical sphere, non-virtual world. So we had to give some training because, for example, researchers didn't know how to approach Google to obtain the information about the profiles, for example. They were not aware of the information they could obtain on social media regarding the activities, our activities. In the case of Diana, for example, what we did first was to obtain all data on digital activity. For example, they had an eCloud account, Instagram account, and Facebook account. Okay, so they got hold of that information. Once we got that information, of these 3 online accounts. We tried to get hold of all Diana mail accounts with the main attempt to reconstruct the digital world of Diana. Of course, with legal authorization, we could also activate her cell phone, and through the systems of double identification, we could get hold of all the social profiles, and from then on obtain all the activity or her activity, positioning, friends, colleagues, conversations, dialogues, participation in fora. We found even another profile in WhatsApp, therefore another cell phone that she had just finished recently. We found another account in Google, another Instagram account, other snapshot account. Imagine, very active. She was very active. So we obtained huge amount of information. And now we had access to the digital life of Diana, and we had to reconstruct it in a way that it was useful for researchers. In that regard, we faced many shortcomings in terms of means, tools. For example, to have access to the cloud world, tools that allowed us to download all the information that we have in the cloud, as for example, Apple Cloud. In the case of Diana, she had lots of security measures installed, and she wanted to keep intimacy as controlled as possible. I remember that the last backup she had went back to the 2nd of February and disappeared on the 21st. So most of the information we retrieved was not very updated, really. Then personal information we obtained as well. Piles of information we got, but all that information has to be interrelated. You have to put names to contacts so that then researchers go and interview these contacts and find out information about the relationship they had with Diana. If it was close or not close, then we had lack of knowledge. There is some information you can obtain from Google or Facebook or Twitter or Apple iCloud, and for us that information later on sometimes is difficult to retrieve. For example, geopositioning perimeters, or geopositioning by means of the cell phones applications. As Carlos mentioned, our cell phone currently includes all our life: economic life, personal life, professional life, intimacy, family, relatives, friends. We have everything in our cell phones. In the case of Monasterio, the same. The girl disappears, leaving all the lights on at home and the cell phone on the table and the television on, and she disappeared all of a sudden. And we have no more information, just the use of the devices. This person also had a lot of activity on social media. She had lots of relationships through social media, and those social media relationships sometimes are transferred to the physical world. Another characteristic is that most of the information we obtain regarding the profiles and social media, it is not information the large operators will provide us with, but rather we, with the legal authorizations necessary and with the coordination of the prosecutor's office, we are replacing the disappeared person to go into his or her intimate world. But Google, Twitter will never give us anything. Even to such extent that Facebook identified an anomalous behavior in her profiles and they blocked it for a while. So we needed the support of the sister to unblock her accounts I don't know whether you have seen the blocked profile on Facebook. The mechanism Facebook uses is that we can identify the people in that picture or in those pictures, because at some point probably those pictures were identifying your profiles or not. So with Diana's sister, we had to have a look at the pictures, identifying the people there to unblock the profiles and to obtain all the information. Obviously, as social media and the media in general were talking about her disappearance morning, night and day, and whatever, there was an alarm alert all over Spain. Many people tried to have access to the social media profiles in both cases of the two girls, probably to have access to information they could not get from other media, and therefore those profiles, unfortunately, we had contacted the operators, the large operators, to tell us whether there was activity in those anomalous profiles, and we had alerts very often, because there were many people in Spain trying to have access to some of their profiles, trying to, give answer to the questions posed to access the profiles to see whether they could enter her profiles or their profiles. So, what we want to share with you is that on a level of research, the means, the tools, and the human resources needed to control or to lead such a research, the technological side is requiring certain know-how. We are very far away, maybe, still, from giving an efficient response or answer, because we do not have all the knowledge. For example, in UK, recently, some statistical data have been published regarding the claims filed before the police forces, whatever, on cyber crimes. And more or less, there are 2 claims of crimes or online per 1 claim in real world. So double online the number of crimes. So many associations defending civil rights are claiming the state to devote the same resources in terms of safety online or security online as in safety in real world, because the number of claims or the number of crimes online are double. I think that is an example to be taken into account on how the research of crimes against women is gaining terrain. Things are changing very fast due to the use of new technologies, and that is a difficulty we encounter. We, I mean the police force. So things are not being easy, so to speak. Thank you.
Bueno, pues gracias Juan Antonio por.
Thanks so much, Juan Antonio, for that explanation on the complexity of technological research, no? That is research online of these kind of behaviors. And we'll now give the floor to the last participant, Carolina Alvarez. She is a lawyer, expert in gender violence, and also director of the legal department of the association Stop Online or Digital Violence. Good morning to you all. On behalf of my association, but not only on behalf of my association, but on my own behalf, I'd like to thank you very much the work you do, because we, or I as a lawyer, the last very step of that pyramid, no? We are in contact with the victim, and although in our association we try to avoid the term victim, I have worked public services for women, and what we meet is victims. I like the terms to be a bit more inclusive, so that we change concepts, we kind of modify the conceptualization of the gender terms. But for that we need a lot of training, a lot of knowledge, and those of you who have been longer involved in this field of action, as for example Prosecutor's Office or the security bodies of the state, we are still starting. We are giving the first baby steps. I'd also like to highlight that when we meet women, first contact, we have to identify, putting a lot of patience into it, that a case of violence, no, gender violence. I'd like that in some years to come we are not here talking about discrimination or violence against minors or women. But in the line of things that I have heard here today in this venue, I'd like to say that we should not set limits. Instrumental limits, instrumental barriers or business barriers, computing barriers are there, but we, women, should work, and men as well should work, to try to prevent potential violent situations. For example, I should educate my girl, who is now 13 years of age, to try to avoid facing those situations. In terms of rights of a lawyer, what we encounter many times is a difficulty to prove facts. We do not have the means they have in the public administration, because digital evidence or proof through research in the hands of the state is not the same as the research we lawyers do, when we face a case and we have to turn that proof into a valid one, resulting in a fine or condemnation or result. No? So far, professional associations are starting to give some digital training, which is good because we need some more training in this regard. We are working with all our colleagues to try to be updated and to try to give real solutions to real cases. Inside the gender aspect, I'd like to include as well those society strata that are least favored, not only women, but also the elderly, the disabled, independently of their gender, and minors, independently of their gender as well. There is a long way to go, but we also have to work in that line of action to provide solutions. The new criminal events, they are quite curious. I'd like to focus on this aspect because I have monitored some cases on sexting, and sexting, for example, had to be handled as a secret revelation or reveal, and that was very difficult to prove. Or disclosure. I'd like to say something in favor of expert witnesses, because we are not presenting just WhatsApp screens or Twitter screens, and if we are doing so, we have advised our client the best we could to preserve the proof. What has happened is that many times they say, well, this has happened to me, I bring it printed, but what about the cell phone or the device? Well, I don't have it, and therefore there is no sentence. I have shared experiences with other colleagues with judges, also with prosecuting colleagues. And we have moved forward, but we need a lot of empathy to try to make the client understand that we need a proof. We need a proof for a sentence, and the sentence will just depend on that proof. As for sexting, things have evolved a lot, but it is a lot among the teenagers. Statistics tell us a little bit more about teenagers. The victim is more of a female victim, and there is a lot of emotional load in terms of dissemination of images. We have shared privately when we had a relationship or an affair with someone. And all of a sudden, when that relationship finishes or ends, imagine those images are everywhere. For example, I have faced that case, and the situation of that victim is terrible. Now, if we guarantee the proof, I had at that point problems with the digital proof. The reform of the year 2015 was not enforced yet, and as a secret disclosure, we try to continue in the line of the civil legislation. And then we have the stalking, which is mobbing, the follow-up, close follow-up. It is a new type of harassment or gender violence that they already had in the Anglo-Saxon. We do not know what the future will look like in terms of the legal framework or sentences. I do not only have to apply law, I have to study previous cases or jurisprudence to see what I have to bring to court, before the court. It seems that the prerequisites will be huge to justify a situation of stalking, mobbing, harassment. In those cases in which we were quite limited because there was no coercement, and therefore the victim was suffering even anxiety and severe health problems. There was some other problem that I am right now working on. It is stalking, but I'm still having difficulties to prove it. And it has to do with upload some ads of my victim at some property websites online, saying that my client is selling her house. She is receiving calls morning, afternoon, evening, and night. She is an older woman. She has been on psychiatric treatment for more than 15 years, and now she is receiving many phone calls, and some of them not very pleasant. She is receiving these phone calls from different phone numbers. We are trying to identify the owners of those phone numbers. Thank you. She's getting messages from different private numbers, and all this linked to the fact that the number, her telephone number, is also uploaded on some sex pages announcing or advertising sex. A woman who is older than 60, more than 15 years of age, on psychiatric treatment. And that's my case right now. We need more training to try to explain the severity of it all to a client, so that we do not lose the potential proofs. We have a protocol in our association, a very new protocol. It is called the DPay protocol. This is a protocol that we have to apply to any person who is facing chauvinist violence, who needs to tell us their case, and that has to do with digital violence. Protocol DIPE, according to the acronym, has to do with identification, prevention, and education. In our association, we have witness experts, experts in cybersecurity, lawyers, you name it. So we need a multidisciplinary team so that we can get hold of any potential problem. As for the interview with the victim, we need to identify, but the identification is based on listening, not to share our own experiences, and never judge. Just try to adopt an empathetic attitude. Never say things like, oh, you should have done it before, this is unbearable, I cannot believe my eyes, whatever. No, some of these sentences that some people still use them in the community of Madrid, for example, or public health services, we cannot express ourselves as such. First, we have to identify, as I said, we identify the type of crime that is being committed, we identify the channel, whether a cell phone has been used, a tablet, a computer. We have a look at the means to disseminate that information to harm the person. Once we have identified all that, we apply prevention measures. The person who is asking us for help, we give them the possibility to install in their cell phone an app called Unidos. It is a young app, recently created app, that will get information on any cyber attack to facilitate the work of the witness experts. Even it has a kind of a button or a switch so that anytime there is cyber attack, you can find out information about the source, the person who is attacking, or the channel being used. Finally, we have education. I'm not referring to educating the victims. The victims are very well-mannered and have a high standard of education. We are referring to digital education. We're going to tell them, watch out, be careful with the passwords, do not accept everybody in Facebook. You are not flirting with someone from Dubai who says that you are fantastic. Loneliness, well, it's a little bit naughty sometimes, but it's very easy. Just apply 4 criteria, and after having applied this protocol, we will be able to defend a case the best we can before the court, and with the help of the prosecutor's office and the safety forces of the state. I'd like to finish with some message. We have to educate, we have to prevent by educating, so that the future of our society, the legacy we will leave for our kids, is a society based on equality. It is not chauvinist equality or feminist equality, it's an equality based on rights, equal rights. That's what we're referring to, so that inequalities do not result in new crimes. Many things only have to do with a lack of empathy and a lack of education by our parents. Thank you so much.
Bueno, pues muchas gracias, Carolina. Únicamente decirte una cosa.
Mention one thing.
No te sientas más sola.
Do not
feel defender a una víctima.
more anymore. Do not feel any more lonely when defending a victim. If you are trying to find proof or you need more information, the prosecutor's office will always be on your side. I tell you, our role is to protect citizens when faced by aggression, by the naughty ones. Okay, so we finish here. I don't know whether there is some time for any question or we have to leave it at that. Do we have time for some questions? If there is any...
So can you hear me? Yes, I work at a foster home, and it is true that we see more and more crimes and insults and attacks through the internet. So I'd like to know whether what you were talking at the end about the tools, if they are available as of now. Where can I find that protocol you were talking about? Because I think it's fundamental for prevention. Because it's true that in 20 years the situation has changed in terms of these crimes. So I'd like to know whether, well, I think what you said about preserving the evidence is critical. So I'd like to know if there is something written that we can let the women read. The protocol, you can find it in our association on the internet, Stop Violencia Digital. It's a very recent association. It's the first association to fight against digital violence without any subsidy, and it's working throughout in Spain. Now we are teaching a basic training course on expert study. We train lawyers. We have many experts, many legal experts. For example, you will hear now later Bruno Pérez, who collaborates with the association. And so the victims call us, they tell us their case, and then the mechanism is triggered. So if you join, or if you contact, if you approach the association, we can provide you with all the information. So you have face-to-face courses, online courses, webinars, etc. And yes, one of the things we insist upon is not to lose the evidence, because I've lost many trials because the evidence was not admitted. So depending on who is against you, the evidence might be admitted or not. But if I am the defendant, one of the evidence won't be a Facebook screenshot or something like that, because it's not acceptable. The other way around. I also do divorce cases. So in all the cases I have to defend or I have to represent, the digital aspect is always involved. So yes, please approach the association for anything you need.
Hola. Gracias por sus presentaciones.
Thank you for your presentations. I think mine is a general question. My name is Renata from Brazil. I am a researcher in technology and gender topics. I'd like to talk about training. So this is the first international forum for gender and cybersecurity. We've talked about how it is important to talk about training. And I was thinking about how much training is necessary. If there is a state-of-the-art training amount, or if there is an end to a training, or if there is a limit to the training. So how can we get a state-of-the-art training? How can we get a uniform training for all regions in Spain? So if you think about the diversity in Spain, let alone the diversity in Brazil, which is a larger country. So Elvira, can you give me the floor? Training never ends. Never. Because if someone says, I already know enough, has to find another profession. You never stop learning. I'm not disencouraging you. Maybe I can use the remaining time for an anecdote. My father once told me, you can be someone in the world if you study and study and study and your elbows are as glossy as the butt of a monkey. So that means you have to study all the time. Because now we are witnessing something that is harmful for women. So even if you say in your resume, I've taken 22 master's degrees, it's okay, but you never stop learning. Because if you stop, it will be bad for women. Because the pain of the victim never stops. Because if you're a professional expert and you want to be on her side, you can never stop.
Plenamente de acuerdo contigo.
I totally agree with you, but I want to get more specific. I think there are more and more training. There's more and more training in this topic. We're organizing a summer boot camp for the end of July to get deeper into these topics. The OAS is also organizing training courses in Latin America. The Council of Europe is organizing training guidelines that can be used in several countries, can be used by all the countries to train their nationals. So I agree with José Antonio. I think this never stops because the technologies change, the problems change, so you can never stop, otherwise it will be obsolete. So you have to keep on studying and learning, so you have to, that way you can be always motivated, even if it's exhausting sometimes. But I think we have to help each other. I cannot organize training activities without inviting the police forces because they know about the technologies. They know a part of the problem, we know another part. We all have to contribute with what we know, and we have to focus upon it jointly. But there are many initiatives for those who have an interest. Is there anything you want to add? So with that, I have to close this panel. And now I think we have a coffee break. Thank you.